Welcome to our channel, where we dive into the most exciting stories. Today, we unravel a tale of resilience, deception, and ultimate justice. Imagine inheriting a cherished family home filled with memories and history, only to find yourself locked in a relentless battle to protect what is rightfully yours. Get ready for an inspiring journey of courage, community, and the enduring power of standing your ground. Autumn cast its golden glow over the small coastal town nestled on an island off the Oregon coast. The island was a sanctuary of serene beauty, renowned for its breathtaking vistas, historic architecture, and a rich tapestry of untamed wilderness. Life here moved at a slower pace, where neighbors greeted each other by name and children played barefoot on the sandy shores. However, recent developments had begun to disrupt the delicate balance of this idyllic existence. Wealthy investors and ambitious developers had set their sights on the island, threatening to replace its charm with sprawling estates and modern complexes. In this peaceful enclave lived Daniel Harper, a 37-year-old high school biology teacher. Known for his quiet demeanor and kind heart, Daniel had always cherished the simple joys of life. He found solace in nature and held deep respect for the traditions passed down through generations of his family. His love for the natural world was matched only by his dedication to his students, often inspiring them to appreciate the beauty of their coastal environment. Daniel's connection to the island went beyond its scenic allure. Just a month earlier, he had inherited his grandfather's oceanside cottage, a small, weathered home perched on a rocky bluff overlooking the Pacific. Built in 1958, the house stood as a testament to old-world craftsmanship, with its cedarwood cladding, antique shutters, and a sturdy stone foundation. Though modest in size, the cottage exuded character, its charm amplified by the wildflowers that framed its garden and the whisper of ocean waves echoing through its halls. For Daniel, the cottage was far more than just a piece of real estate. It was the heart of his childhood, a sanctuary where summers were spent exploring tide pools and gathering driftwood with his grandfather, who had instilled in him a profound respect for nature's delicate balance. The house held the laughter of shared stories, the aroma of freshly baked bread, and the quiet wisdom of a man who believed in the enduring value of preserving the past. Now, as the sole caretaker of this family heirloom, Daniel felt both pride and responsibility. The cottage was more than an inheritance. It was a legacy. Each beam and stone told a story, a chapter of his family's resilience and connection to the land. Its weathered shingles whispered secrets of storms weathered and sunsets admired, and Daniel was determined to protect it from the encroaching tide of modernity that threatened to engulf the island. It was a crisp October morning when Daniel first encountered the sharp edge of modern bureaucracy. He had been busy clearing the cottage's overgrown garden, piling up seaweed that had washed ashore during a recent storm, when the sound of deliberate footsteps on the graveled driveway caught his attention. Turning, he saw a woman striding purposefully toward him, her expression as cold and unyielding as the autumn wind. She wore a tailored blazer and carried a clipboard as though it were a weapon. This was Joanna Whitmore, president of the Riviera Bluff Homeowners Association. "Excuse me," she began, her voice clipped and professional. "You're trespassing. This property is part of our community, and any changes must go through the HOA approval process." Daniel stared at her, bewildered. "I'm not sure what you mean. This cottage isn't part of the HOA. It's been in my family since 1958. Joanna's eyes narrowed, her clipboard held higher like a shield. "I'm afraid you're mistaken. All properties on this bluff fall under our jurisdiction. Your unauthorized activities here are a violation of our architectural standards." Feeling a mix of frustration and disbelief, Daniel wiped his hands on his jeans. "I have the deed, the will, and tax records to prove my ownership," he said, striving to remain calm. "This property predates your HOA. I'm happy to show you the documents." But Joanna wasn't interested in his explanation. "You'll need to vacate immediately until this matter is resolved," she snapped, before turning on her heel and marching away. Confused but determined, Daniel went inside the cottage to retrieve the papers his grandfather had meticulously preserved. By the time he returned to the driveway, Joanna was gone. Instead, 2 police cruisers were pulling in, their lights flashing. The sight made his stomach drop. One of the officers, a grizzled man with a calm demeanor, approached Daniel. "We received a report of trespassing," he said. "Can you explain what's going on?" Daniel handed over his documents without hesitation. "This is my property," he said. "I inherited it last month, and I have all the legal paperwork to prove it." The officer examined the deed, will, and tax records, nodding slowly as he read. Meanwhile, Joanna, who had reappeared with a smug expression, whispered urgently to another officer, but her confidence faltered as the senior officer returned the papers to Daniel. "Everything checks out," he said firmly. "This property is not under HOA jurisdiction. You have every right to be here." Joanna's face flushed red. "That can't be. Our maps clearly show—" "Your maps are wrong," the officer interrupted. "Unless you have evidence to the contrary, this matter is closed." Furious, Joanna stormed away, but not before hissing, "You'll regret this." As the police left, Daniel stood in the driveway, clutching the papers that confirmed his rights, yet feeling the first tendrils of unease. It was clear Joanna and the HOA weren't going to let this go without a fight. What began as a tense confrontation soon spiraled into an unrelenting campaign of harassment. Over the following weeks, Daniel found himself targeted by the HOA at every turn. It started subtly, letters in his mailbox demanding compliance with HOA guidelines, despite his property's exclusion. The notices cited vague infractions, unauthorized landscaping, excessive noise from property maintenance, and even unapproved outdoor furniture. At first, Daniel dismissed the letters as clerical errors, but their tone grew more menacing. When the letters failed to elicit a response, the HOA escalated its tactics. Joanna filed a series of noise complaints with the local police, alleging that Daniel's early morning yard work disturbed the peace. Officers, often the same ones who had verified his ownership, arrived apologetically, but explained they were obligated to investigate. Each visit chipped away at Daniel's patience, though he maintained his composure. One morning, Daniel returned from running errands to find a landscaping crew on his property. The workers were uprooting the native dune grass and shrubs that had thrived there for decades, replacing them with neatly trimmed hedges and ornamental plants. Daniel rushed to confront the crew. "What are you doing on my property?" he demanded. The foreman, holding a clipboard eerily similar to Joanna's, replied, "We have an HOA work order to update landscaping to community standards." "This property isn't part of the HOA." Daniel shot back. "You're trespassing. Stop immediately or I'll call the police." The foreman hesitated, but ultimately ordered his team to halt. Daniel wasted no time contacting law enforcement and documenting the damage. This time, the officers arrived with a supervisor who took detailed statements and confirmed that the HOA's work order held no legal weight on Daniel's property. Realizing he needed professional help, Daniel reached out to Clara Mendez, a sharp and experienced attorney specializing in property disputes. Clara listened intently as Daniel recounted the events, her expression growing darker with each detail. "This isn't just harassment," she said. "It's a coordinated effort to bully you off your land. We're going to hit back." Clara filed lawsuits against the HOA for harassment, trespassing, and vandalism, compiling an airtight case with photos, police reports, and testimony from sympathetic neighbors. The discovery process revealed damning evidence. Internal HOA emails discussing strategies to pressure Daniel into selling, including fabricating violations and leveraging legal threats. As the court date approached, Daniel felt a mix of apprehension and resolve. The cottage, his family's legacy, had weathered decades of storms, and he was determined to ensure it would withstand this human tempest as well. The courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing, the tension palpable as Daniel's case against the HOA was brought before the judge. Clara Mendez stood confidently at his side, her presence a stark contrast to the fidgeting attorneys representing the HOA. Joanna Whitmore, seated with the defendants, maintained her icy composure, though her tight-lipped expression betrayed her unease. Clara began her argument by presenting a meticulous timeline of the HOA's actions against Daniel. Each fabricated violation, each false police report, and each instance of trespassing was documented and laid bare before the court. Photos of the damaged landscaping, video footage of the unauthorized workers on Daniel's property, and internal HOA emails discussing strategies to force Daniel's hand painted a damning picture. The judge listened intently, occasionally glancing at the HOA's legal team, who seemed increasingly cornered. Clara's pièce de résistance came when she revealed evidence of collusion between the HOA and a major developer. Internal correspondence showed that the HOA had been promised incentives to pressure Daniel into selling his property, a revelation that drew audible gasps from the gallery. When it was the defense's turn, their arguments crumbled under the weight of Clara's evidence. They attempted to claim that their actions were in the best interest of the community, but the judge was unimpressed. The HOA's jurisdiction is clear, he stated firmly. This property predates your organization, and your repeated harassment of the plaintiff is unacceptable. The ruling was swift and decisive. The court found the HOA guilty of harassment, trespassing, and vandalism. Joanna Whitmore was ordered to resign from her position immediately, her actions deemed a gross abuse of power. The HOA was fined $165,000 in damages, covering the restoration of Daniel's property and his legal fees. Additionally, the HOA was required to issue a formal written apology to Daniel and implement reforms to prevent future abuses of power. As the verdict was read, Daniel felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Months of stress and uncertainty melted away, replaced by a renewed determination to preserve his family's legacy. Outside the courtroom, Clara shook his hand with a satisfied smile. "You did it," she said. "Your grandfather would be proud." The aftermath of the trial sent ripples through the community. Neighbors who had been silent during Daniel's ordeal now approached him with apologies and offers of support. The cottage, once a target of scorn, became a symbol of resilience against greed and corruption. Joanna's resignation marked the beginning of a new chapter for the HOA, one where transparency and fairness replaced manipulation and intimidation. Daniel used part of the settlement to restore the cottage's landscaping to its former glory, planting native grasses and flowers that his grandfather had loved. The rest went into a fund dedicated to maintaining the property for future generations. As he stood on the porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he felt a profound sense of peace. The cottage had weathered another storm, and its foundations, both literal and metaphorical, were stronger than ever. The months following the trial brought sweeping changes to the HOA and the surrounding community. The court's mandate required the HOA to redraw its jurisdictional boundaries and submit revised documentation to local authorities. This process exposed years of inconsistencies and overreach, prompting a thorough audit of their operations. The findings resulted in additional penalties and the implementation of stricter oversight measures. Meanwhile, the developers who had colluded with the HOA faced their own reckoning. Environmental agencies, spurred by evidence uncovered during the trial, launched investigations into their projects. Violations of coastal preservation laws led to hefty fines, and construction on new luxury homes was indefinitely halted. The island's fragile ecosystem, once threatened by unchecked development, now had a chance to recover. For Daniel, the victory was deeply personal. With the HOA's influence diminished, he could finally focus on restoring the cottage to its former glory. Using the settlement funds, he hired local artisans to repair the cedar shingles, repaint the weathered shutters, and rebuild the stone pathways that wound through the garden. Native plants were carefully reintroduced, creating a harmonious blend of beauty and sustainability. The transformation did not go unnoticed. Neighbors who had once sided with the HOA began to see the cottage in a new light. Its rustic charm and historical significance became a point of pride for the community. Daniel's dedication inspired others to reconsider their own properties, and soon the island saw a resurgence of interest in preserving its unique heritage. One day, as Daniel was tending to the garden, a group of children from the local school approached him. They had heard about the cottage and its history and were eager to learn more. Daniel welcomed them warmly, sharing stories of his grandfather and the lessons he'd learned about respecting nature. The visit marked the beginning of a new tradition, with the cottage becoming an educational hub for teaching future generations about the island's history and ecology. As the seasons changed, Daniel found a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. The battles he had fought were not just for the cottage, but for the values it represented. Standing on the porch one crisp autumn evening, he watched the waves crash against the shore and felt a deep connection to the land and his family's legacy. The cottage, once threatened by greed and ambition, now stood as a testament to resilience and the enduring power of community. The HOA, under new leadership, took steps to rebuild trust with the residents. Their meetings became open forums for discussion, and their policies shifted to prioritize transparency and fairness. While the scars of the past could not be erased, the changes signaled a brighter future for the neighborhood. Daniel's story became a source of inspiration, not just for his community, but for others facing similar struggles. It was a reminder that standing up for what's right, even in the face of overwhelming odds, could create lasting change. And as the sun set over the horizon, casting its golden light on the cottage, it was clear that the battle for its preservation had been worth every moment. Months after the dust of the legal battle had settled, Daniel found himself immersed in the quiet restoration of the cottage. While sorting through boxes of old family belongings stored in the attic, he stumbled upon something extraordinary: his grandmother's handwritten journal. The pages, yellowed with age, were filled with stories, reflections, and fragments of wisdom that brought her spirit vividly to life. One entry in particular caught his eye. "This cottage," she had written in 1982, "is more than just wood and stone. It is the heart of our family, a place where memories take root and grow like the wildflowers on the dunes. No amount of money can replace the laughter of children playing in the tide pools or the peace of watching the sun set over the ocean. To protect this home is to honor our past and safeguard our future." Daniel's chest tightened as he read her words. Her vision for the cottage was exactly what he had fought so hard to preserve. She had seen its worth not in monetary terms, but in the intangible beauty of tradition, family, and connection to the natural world. It was as though she had foreseen the battles he would face and left behind a beacon of guidance. Inspired by her wisdom, Daniel decided to share the journal with the community. He organized a small gathering at the cottage, inviting neighbors, local historians, and students from his biology classes. Reading aloud from the journal, he spoke about the importance of preserving not just the cottage, but the values it represented: respect for nature, the power of community, and the strength to stand against greed. The event was transformative. Neighbors who had once viewed the cottage as an eyesore began to see it as a symbol of resilience. Local historians pledged to document its story as part of the island's heritage, and students left inspired to take better care of their environment. The cottage had become more than a home. It was now a cornerstone of the community. In the months that followed, the island saw a shift in priorities. The lessons from Daniel's struggle rippled outward, influencing decisions about development and conservation. The HOA, under its new leadership, adopted policies that emphasized transparency and ecological responsibility. Developers, wary of further legal battles, scaled back their ambitions, and the island's natural beauty remained intact. For Daniel, life returned to its quiet rhythm, but the experience had left an indelible mark. The cottage stood as a reminder of what could be achieved when one stood firm in their convictions. Each day as he walked along the shore or tended to the garden, he felt his grandmother's presence in the rustle of the seagrass and the warmth of the sun on his face. On a particularly golden evening, as he sat on the porch with a cup of tea, a group of children from the local school approached. They were eager to learn about the native plants and coastal ecosystem. Daniel welcomed them with a smile, sharing stories of his grandfather and the lessons he'd learned about living in harmony with the environment. The children's laughter echoed through the garden, a joyful reminder that the cottage's legacy would live on through future generations. In the end, the battle for the cottage was about more than property rights. It was a testament to the enduring power of tradition, the importance of protecting the natural world, and the strength of standing up for what truly matters. As Daniel watched the sun dip below the horizon, he knew the fight had been worth it. The cottage, with its weathered cedar shingles and wildflower-filled garden, was more than a home. It was a beacon of hope, resilience, and the enduring spirit of the island.